Hey there, this is Kiz from Glowitheflow podcast. I'm repping hip hop therapy and therapeutic hip hop. The podcasts that we're doing at the moment are looking at how we can spread impact and evaluation in the field. And today's guest is jetting in online through the internet, Dr. Raphael Travis. Can you tell us what you do?
Hello, kids. Thank you so much for the invitation. Raphael Travis, Dr. Raphael Travis. I wear many hats, in one regard, I'm in the classroom as an educator, trying to help prepare the next generation of social workers to go out and do amazing things and really play a positive and transformative role in the lives of families and communities. I'm also a researcher and really trying to better understand pathways to well-being, mental health, physical health, really all aspects of well-being, but particularly through the use of hip hop culture. And hip hop culture as a meaningful path to learning and growth. Also do a lot of service or, collaborations, partnerships with community organizations, other professionals like yourself, people out working in the community on behalf of promoting well-being. And over the last 5 years, I've also been in an administrative role over our graduate social work, serving as the director of our MSW program, which is the graduate social work program here at Texas State University.
Amazing.
So a lot of hats. And I'm also a partner and a parent, father. And it's a little about me.
I can add another noun on the end. A legend. You're a legend in public health and hip hop, sir. So I'm very grateful for you to be on today.
Thank you.
How did you come about to this work?
Yeah. So, in short, I knew that early on that I wanted to help young people. I wasn't really sure how, thought about psychology and kind of stumbled into social work and realizing it was the best of both worlds between psychology and sociology and allowing me to actually work and have an impact in a lot of different ways. That's one of the great things about social work. There's one-on-one work, there's group work, there's community work, there's advocacy, there's research. And so really felt like that spoke to how I wanted to contribute to the world. And then I moved into public health as well, which really had a very significant community lens to how we think about well-being, not just at the individual level, but at the community level, and really what impact that has on individuals and families. And so between social work and public health, it opened a door to really trying to understand what are the things that people are doing in communities to promote well-being. And I saw that connection where in a lot of spaces, hip hop culture, all the things that I had grown up loving and appreciating about hip hop culture for its impact on me personally, I saw that people were really leveraging the culture in ways that helped individuals and help communities. And so I wanted to understand more about that. And so as a researcher, we get the great opportunity to both try to understand things better, but then also to implement what we understand and apply it and try to look at different strategies and ways that we can really apply those understandings to have the types of impacts that we want. And so it really was a perfect marriage of my interests, what I cared about, my passion for really contributing to making our communities better, and my love for hip hop.
What do you enjoy most about your job?
So many things. Each of those hats that I mentioned earlier has their own rewards. In the classroom, I love seeing students, when they hit that aha moment, when things just crystallize and they get those insights and they really see why understanding certain things are important and how they can use it personally and professionally. there's really nothing better than that. On the research side, I love discovery. I love thinking about the questions that we don't really have a good answer to, and trying to figure out how we can learn more about that. I love trying to create a language and structure for some of the things that we don't know, when we do get that better understanding, how to really try to crystallize in a way that other people can understand, and professionals that are doing the work, how they can use it. Um, and I love being able to immerse myself in topics and ideas and things that are both interesting and incredibly important, right? Like what's more important than understanding how to help people be well, or to shine a light on the things that people are doing to keep themselves well. I can't think of many other things that are better than that. And the two things aside from my family that, really fuel my life are music and sports. And so I get to, spend the lion's share of my time immersing myself in art and music. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
what gets better than that? And yeah.
So, how do you know a good therapeutic workshop has happened? What are the indicators?
That's it's interesting. So everything is subjective. So I can speak to what it seems to me like that it's good, right? We really don't know. Well, we have a limited insight into what is sort of good, right? And one of the challenges in being a helping professional is you really don't know the impact of your work truly, right? Sometimes on the outside, it looks like nothing happened. But that little nugget a person will take with them, and years later they'll be able to really embrace that little nugget that they got out of that experience that maybe they couldn't grasp onto at that particular time. But I'd say for me, in general, I'd say, we have our formal indicators. So in the classroom, you look at grades and things like that. And does it seem like in their papers or whatever that they grasp the topics? If you're doing a workshop, do you see that reduction in anxiety or depression, those kind of formal measures? So we have to have those. And so that's a great indication. And in a lot of my work, we've seen that, I've seen those positives. So that's one indicator. But the more subjective, informal indicator, um, you can see, I think in the classroom, like you can see that growth that students have from the beginning of the class to the end of the class, where they're making connections, they're more engaged, they're able to you're able to see them connect the dots. In workshops, you see the same things, right? When people come in, kind of shy and closed off, and by the end, they're engaged and they're participating and they're creating, and you see and hear another side of them that wasn't there in the beginning. You see that growth, you see that kind of transformation, and there's nothing better than that. A lot of our work in terms of like the therapeutic uses of the culture are around, rewriting a narrative, or helping people access a voice that they didn't know that they had, helping people to connect with others, whereas maybe they were more isolated or a loner, or didn't feel safe connecting with others. And so you see that growth that happens in those spaces, which is priceless.
Sure is. There's no money that you can put onto that feeling when somebody's landed a concept that's either going to help them or join up the dots for them. And especially in this kind of community space, it's incredible. What are the things that you have to do to make sure a workshop goes well from a practitioner point of view? What helps ensure good practice?
Yeah, so for me, I'm pretty strict. There are some, from these are me myself, and other people have different things, but there are certain key things that I have to do, and I feel like really are more important than anything. And that's the first one is validation. Validate, validate, validate. So if somebody's saying something to you, validate it. That means give it back to them, make sure that they feel understood, right? No matter who it is, whatever is being said, validate it. It means, reflect it, try to reflect it with some depth, maybe even add a layer. People talk about kind of like empathic responding, but for a lot of people, they don't get the chance to share and to talk. And I really want whatever space whatever comment it is, needs to be highlighted and underscored and validated and given back to them. And that's number one for me. So if you're with me and you say something, we're going to give that space to breathe and honor and be present for that. So that's my number one. And kind of building off that positive environment, a supportive environment, affirming, however you show up, you're important. I want you to be here. What you have to say, what you do, what you contribute is meaningful. Encourage, right? There's no such thing as a stupid question. There's no, whatever you either create or say, there's room for it. Now, at the same time, coupled with that is to reframe and model. So if things are said that may be, unhealthy or toxic, then that's an opportunity to reframe it and model what might be healthier or maybe another way to think about something. And so that's a meaningful contribution because we can reframe it. We can learn from it. We can think about it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So those are the non-negotiables for me, and then on top of that comes like the model stuff, right? So, ensure that you're creating opportunities for people to connect with each other, creating an overall sense of community and belonging, all the therapeutic stuff that comes on top. But those first things, those are the things that I know I can do as an individual, as a facilitator in that space to try to create an environment that people feel more empowered, that they want to come back. They know when they come to that space that it's going to be a positive, meaningful space. Yeah.
Thank you. What makes your workshop safe for you to deliver and for participants to take part?
Yeah, I try to really value everyone, and, all the things that I just spoke to. But I think a part of that also is, everything's not going to be perfect and people are going to show up however they show up. And sometimes some interactions are not going to be the healthiest or most supportive. And so for me, try not to let anything that's like risky or unhealthy slide, like those types of interactions. Really have to address them, right? I don't want people leaving and say, such and such happened and, Dr. Travis didn't say anything or didn't do anything or, everybody sees this happening and nobody does anything, right? That's something that I think is important from a safety standpoint, right? From a physical and emotional safety standpoint.
So just to clarify that, you're talking about as the facilitator taking control of highlighting something that needs to be addressed in the group when like a group actions happen that's been detrimental to a group member or a individual figure might have dominated the group and not given people a chance to finish what they were saying or something like that. So you're talking about somebody being in charge and control that can like pick up these things. And you get bystander syndrome, don't you, where something bad happens and then because there's lots of people there, nobody stands forward because they don't want to be the one to intervene, kind of thing.
Exactly.
It's like leading a position, somebody in a position of power, because you are the facilitator of a session. So you do have power whether you want it or not. But you need to
Exactly.
step in if something's not going quite right, or judge what to overlook, maybe, because sometimes people can be chaotic and present with lots of disruptions. But if you pick up every single thing, it might mean there's a lot of stopping and starting, and you have to choose maybe when to pick them up so that the relationship for everybody and the group doesn't get too ruffled, or the disruption in the activity isn't so much that you can't continue the session, kind of thing.
Yeah, you bring up a great point, right? So the first part is, yeah, in general,
Mm.
to address things that need to be addressed from an overall group standpoint. But your great second point is like, well, then what do you do when it's so frequent
Mm.
that if you were to address every single thing, would that potentially disrupt the group as well, right? Um, and as you say, one strategy is like, how do I pick and choose which are the things to address so that we can move forward, but still address the things that need to be addressed? And that's, that is a case by case basis. Sometimes you can figure out a balance where the things that you let go aren't toxic. They may be more disruptive than unhealthy and toxic, right?
Mm.
So I think there's a subtle difference, right? So if they're toxic, right, where it's demeaning to another group member, or it's overtly triggering to, or it's a violation of like what we have all considered this is appropriate. Um, we have to address those. But if it's more of a disruptive, like this isn't great, um, disruptive, then we may allow some degree of disruption in order to make things continue. Like, so for example, if a person has a nervous tick, or, they're self-soothing by tapping, but it's a little bit distracting, right? That's not toxic, it's disruptive, but maybe we recognize that that's allowing that person to help kind of regulate themselves. They're a little bit more anxious. You know, and it would be great if they didn't tap the whole time, but we recognize that there's some other things, and we can let that slide to a certain extent. Now, if they're saying "f you" to, you know every response that they don't agree with, then we can't let that go. You know what I mean? So,
Mm.
um, so
Pick
there's
your
some
battles. Pick your battles.
right, yeah,
So
but
the
yeah, in general, in terms of safety, um, really just try to be mindful of those really unhealthy, risky, toxic interactions.
Thank you. What are the external factors that could help to deliver a good therapeutic hip hop workshop? So thinking about systems, funding, people.
Yeah, that's an important question, right? So, some could argue that doesn't matter what's happening externally, as long as you do what you need to do, then you don't have to worry about anybody else, right? I can show up with, a cardboard box and myself, and I can deliver a good therapeutic workshop, which in many regards is true, right? Don't need a lot. I do a lot of music-based stuff, so I'd say I just need my phone and a little portable speaker, and we can make the magic happen. And that's true to a certain extent, but I believe there are some external factors that can enhance these types of therapeutic workshops considerably. I think first and foremost is just a supportive setting or environment or system that you're a part of. So, for example, I'm here at Texas State in the School of Social Work, and one of the things that was very helpful was having a supportive system where space is a really significant commodity. It's very hard to get space. Um, but having a supportive system that says, hey, you know, the work that you're doing is valuable. It's important. We see the impact. So you can use this space on a regular basis. And so I know I have a dedicated space. Whereas if I didn't, you know, simply to run a group with multiple people and equipment, every time we would have to transport the equipment, we'd have to set it up, we'd have to break it down, we'd have to transport it back, right? Every single time. And that could work, but it alleviates so much where that time and energy can go to better planning, better strategizing, things like that. Funding, you know, funding isn't the end all to be all, but it is helpful for some of those small little extras. So we have food, we have snacks, we have we can you know, have visual things to make the space more, you know, visually engaging. We have seating and things to make the space more comfortable. You know, so funding, not the end all. I could have my cardboard box and my phone and my speaker, and we're good.
That's hip hop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing too is, you know, collaborations. So those are external factors. By having great collaborators like yourself, and you know, some of the people that we know and value as important people doing this type of work, having those types of external collaborations is really helpful, right? So there are certain things that I'm especially passionate about, but I don't know everything. And it's great to bring in somebody that's very passionate about something that's related, but their passion, right? To be able to speak to that or add that expertise about, you know, thinking about like beat making, right? So I can make some beats, but I'm not an expert beat maker. I don't know the history of beat. I don't know how the culture has evolved. I don't know all the new branches of beat making that are continue to emerge, all the latest technology, right? So it's great to have those external collaborators that can really give you that depth in understanding about certain things, and then relate it to the types of therapeutic experiences that, you know, that I'm trying to create. And also credibility, right? It lends a lot of credibility for someone like that's their thing, you know, as opposed to me trying to talk about something that's not my thing, you know. So those are some of the external factors I think are important. But I think that a supportive environment is really critical. There are not a lot of people doing this work, and to be able to have people that trust and support what we're trying to do can go a long way in being able to ultimately try to create the types of therapeutic experiences that we know can be meaningful.
There's an outward facing aspect of your response to that question that nobody else has mentioned in terms of other people coming in this external factors thing, which is cool. And it just makes me think about, you know, growing yourself, sowing the seeds in yourself, exposing yourself to other people so you can grow from the richness of their, you know, their fruits of their experience. And then, you know, you'll change forever, because when you interact with somebody and you hear them talk and your ideas merge, when you're talking to other people, quite often I notice I start to change how I present, how I talk, how I refer to my practice, and which aspects I bring into discussion. So that is an external factor that I hadn't considered, which is cool because it's like the human external factors. Thank you again. So
Yeah.
what barriers might stop you from offering a good therapeutic hip hop workshop?
I think there are a lot of ways that we could run into some hiccups. I probably would say one of the biggest ones is not not having a strong enough grasp of your own stuff. Um, we don't know what's going to show up. We don't know how people are going to react to certain things, but we have to be able to, we have to know our own stuff enough to also know how other people might respond. So we have to be able to frame and process issues. I'm thinking particularly in the face of like trauma and stress and discomfort and the things that can emerge out of this work. We have to have an understanding of how sensitive people can be about certain things and the types of things that people are dealing with and processing. And so a part of that is to know our own stuff, you know. I guess we can't be cavalier about people's struggles, I guess is the easiest way to kind of say that, right? Is being mindful that there are a lot of potential landmines and issues. And so, you know, we may use a lot of songs that are narratives about the lived experience because they're valuable, because they're narratives about the lived experience and things that people are dealing with, are coping with, and then aspirationally the direction that people are trying to go, right? So it's a rich landscape of material to help people work with their own life and experiences. And so there are a lot of opportunities there, but a part of that is us understanding we don't know where people are going to latch on to, what's going to resonate with them. So we have to be able to look at that landscape and say, oh, okay, there's probably about 15 to 20 things here that people might latch on to. We have no idea, but there's about 15 here. And actually, I have personal experience with 10 of them. And, you know, I'm comfortable with where I fall in all 10 of those areas. If, you know, 5 of them I'm still working with and I'm still maybe triggered by some and I don't know how to manage that, that can be very problematic, right? Because what if that's the thing that somebody else latches onto? You haven't really done all your work in that area and they're particularly struggling with it or, you know, have a really strong reaction to it. How are you going to help validate, empathize, help them to reframe, reorient, help them, you know, maybe if they're still exploring, help them create their own art as they explore that issue. Not saying that, you know, we're perfect and we know everything, just that you don't want your stuff to contaminate the therapeutic learning and growth that you are trying to cultivate in that space. You don't want you showing up in that, right? Because it's about them or it's about the community as they're working with it. So, you know, ultimately a major barrier is your inability to be solid in the face of trauma and stress and discomfort can be a major barrier. You, the other thing too is and it's all related. All this is related, right? Like to be able to articulate nuance and subtlety of these really sensitive issues. You know, people's experiences are very specific and you want to help get to that level of specificity because that's what validation is. If you're way up here in its surface, that's not true validation, right? It's not allowed to get down to the heart of it. Ultimately, it comes from their voice, but we have to be able to validate their voice. Whatever they give, we have to be able to validate down to that, you know. It's like, oh, it sounds like this. Well, not really. It's more like this. Oh, okay. So you got to be able to get down to that. On a more practical level, though, I think another struggle or barrier is not having enough time to properly like plan, set up, execute, and then debrief, reflect, process, think about the impacts of that workshop experience. There needs to be space on both sides to, you don't want to be rushing from one thing to another. I mean, that happens because we're busy and life is full of a lot of things. So I say it's like completely avoidable, but it's a barrier if you do not have the proper time on both sides of that workshop, because you want to be fully present. You also want to be able to think about, okay, how might this go? How might that go? And you don't want to be, rushing so that, the first 10 minutes of the experience, you're just catching your breath and trying to figure out where you are, right? You want to be able to be fully present for all those reasons that we just talked about, right? This is oftentimes really sensitive and challenging stuff. And you also want to be able to maximize your creativity, right? A lot of the people that are doing this work are creatives as well, right? And so that creativity doesn't necessarily mean just like a product. Like everything you do is creative, right? So maybe something spontaneous comes up to you as you're engaging, that's a type of creativity. But if your mind is like cluttered or you're rushed, you don't have access to that, right? That ability to pivot, to be flexible, to be creative on the spot, right? And so I think that's really important as well. To reframe, right? Those corrective reframes that we talked about earlier, right? So you want to be as sharp as you can. And so having the space so that, you're all in, you're 100%. Once we start this workshop, it's like, let's go, right? I think is really, really important.
So there's something in there about your own well-being and safety and self-care. So having space, clarity, time to work on your own stuff, and giving fully in a workshop help to create a good therapeutic experience.
Yeah. Okay. And, and for most people that are in that role are they're just very giving people, right? And it's an opportunity to just be there for other people, and to the extent that you can be there fully present. And not saying you have to be, because right, that's the other side of the argument, right? The other side of the argument is you want to be authentic, and people want to see people real. And, if you're going through stuff, then people need to see you going through stuff. And that's a fair argument. And so, and there are a lot of people that feel that way. You show up how you show up, right? I'm just saying, like, that can be a barrier sometimes if that takes away from you being able to give 100% to them. Not saying that that's the only way or the right way. It's just my perspective of how I try to be in those spaces.
So I guess this is talking about what outcome you want in the workshop for the participants and the people. Do you want them to go through a therapeutic process? Are you trained for that? Can you recognize the elements that are needed for that, for them and for yourself? If that's not what you're doing, if you're not engaging in therapy or a therapeutic process, but you're doing like a workshop where you might be handling areas of well-being, but there isn't a process of emotional release or catharsis, emotional release or catharsis, or a journey of healing kind of thing. Because you could argue that you are in a community space where something's needed and you're not 100% yourself, but there's nothing else going on. So you're sort of being there for other people that need you. And in that area, you might be doing creative stuff that's fun and distracting you from other things and taking you out of your normal everyday life so that you've got imagination, space to play, create, experience joy. And that is a healing thing in itself, but it's not about an overall process where you're taking people on a journey through healing, which is something completely separate. And it's a separate art to having a workshop, which is fun and distracting and creates joy because something is fun. So thank you for highlighting that. We'll separate these two circumstances so that people who are listening can idealize in their minds what different things we need to do for different people in different processes.
Well, and I think there's a third one too. I think there's a camp of people that say even in those therapeutic spaces, people want to see people in their full element, right? They want to see people that maybe don't show up fully, whatever is going on, like that's the real them, and not derogatory air quotes, but they feel like that quote unquote authenticity is positive for a therapeutic relationship.
Can you tell me a bit more about that? What do you mean?
Yeah. So if I had a hard day and, I'm working with a person, we show up to start our session or it's a group or whatever. And I'm struggling with some stuff that day and I show up as struggling, right? Not necessarily making it about me, but I'm not fully present. Then that shows that I'm sort of a human being too, right? And if I'm a little bit frazzled, that's just because that's who my personality is frazzled and I'm a little bit all over the place, right? Some people argue that that's a human being, right? I'm showing what an authentic human being is and all their imperfections and things like that. And that in and of itself is therapeutic. Whereas I'm saying, no, I want to make sure that whenever I show up, I'm going to show up clear-headed, focused, and doing the things that I need to do, right? So it's kind of two different ideas about what is best.
And actually, the new scenario you painted where you might be intending to be clear, but you show up frazzled, that can aid the therapeutic relationship between you and somebody else because you showed your humanity and removed some of the fear or scariness about you being the facilitator, the person in charge, the authority, the dominator, or the excluder. Because quite often in school, you find yourself excluded in the classroom by a teacher, told to shut up, silence, step out the room, you're being disruptive, or your work's not good enough, you're not going to make this set next year. So these are other things that help to make you feel like a peer as a support, not as a control figure in a negative way. And there are different times you want to step in and out of those modalities as a facilitator. But just thinking, when I've in the past been in a scenario where I was with people who basically were considered criminals by the state, I remember I had to travel in the morning and sometimes it was a bit of a rush going from one city to the next because of the timings, and I'd always intend to skip the rush hour and go early, but sometimes I'd have to go past the rush hour and go just before the session, and I'd still get there in time. But one day stuff happened and I didn't quite make it, just as normal. So when I walked in, I was a bit late, 5-10 minutes late. And I said, look, so and so happened with the traffic, and let's just pull out an idea from a hat. The milk was off when I poured my uh, cereal into a bowl, and so I had to throw my breakfast away and then nip to the shop and get some more milk. We've all done that. Do you know what I mean? And then you can be like, well, that one little thing meant that if I left, I'd be going in the traffic, and then I'd just be like in the car for the same amount of time as if I just missed that half an hour space. And so I'm sorry I didn't get here on time. It makes people feel like that you're real and you're not like a caricature, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and and I think the late and like frazzled is maybe isn't the best example, because you want to be natural, you want to be yourself. And I think the 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 idea more is like wanting to be prepared and emotionally clear,
Not
as
thinking
opposed,
about not thinking
you
about
know
the
what I
path
mean?
and the journey.
Right.
What am I?
Yeah.
Am I late?
Yeah, because stuff happens, and um, and you want to be natural, you want to be yourself, and and hip hop is that. Like, you want to be your authentic self, but you also want to be all in to what's happening in that space, and not make it about you, and keep it about them. So I think that's more of a kind of where I was thinking about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Looking back to when you began this work, can you tell us one or two things that would have helped you measure the impact of your work better or more easily?
In terms of kind of measuring impact, I guess there are different sides of my work. There's like the research side, and then there's the practice side. But on the research side, my goal was really just to better understand, because I came into it, my initial work wasn't hip hop specific. It was, how do we help young people be the best versions of themselves, period. Whatever it was, could have been through basket weaving, it could have been through scuba diving, it could have been through anything. That was my main thing. Like, what does well look like, and how do we get them there? And from a measurement side, at that point, that was kind of the thing. It was, we don't want to measure the prevention of bad stuff. We want to figure out, how do we measure the things that we want to see, right? The positive things. So greater confidence and better relationships, more empathy and caring, sense of belonging and community, right? So that was kind of the direction of things. It's like, well, what does positive impact look like? And then moving from there, we started to say, well, there's a lot of people using hip hop to promote this good stuff. And so that was my goal at the time, was to better understand how might hip hop fit into this idea of promoting well-being. And so it was more exploration at that point. But once we did start to crystallize some ideas of what might be going on, then that's when we said, okay, well, let's test it out. And that's where the impact piece started to come in. Okay, if we use hip hop in these different ways, and there's a million different ways we might use it, this is the way I'm most interested in. If we begin to use hip hop in these ways, then what might we want to see? And there's a couple of pieces that are important to this conversation. One is the difference between qualitative and quantitative information. And I made a deliberate decision early on to focus more on the quantitative side. The reason that I did is because of the unfair. It's unfair, but the reputation of qualitative information versus quantitative information within academic spaces. And there's a lot of work that had been done more qualitatively, right? The storytelling, like why might using hip hop be helpful? A lot of that. But unfortunately, the stereotype of not, okay, well, show me the numbers, right? I want to see the numbers, the impact. That wasn't really there, but that stereotype was there. And so I said, okay, if I'm going to start in this hip hop work, I really want it to be taken seriously. And I understand that this is not right, but I really want to contribute to the quantitative side of things.
It's a nightmare, isn't it? Because it's like saying that one part of your humanity is not correct, but the other side is. So your logical, reasoning, measurable, number-based aspects of your being. I mean, how much do you sweat when you're under stress? How heartbeat rate
Yeah.
changes when you're before or after a workshop and all that kind of stuff? Like the numbers about your body, they're no more or less important than whether you have a daydream or you hiccup or something unexpectedly when you're a bit scared or frightened and you go,
And then the paradox of it is, at the same time, nobody cares about numbers. They just want to hear about the stories, right? Like, what's the thing that gets people's attention is the stories. So it's like this weird thing that goes on. And so, to your point, what would have helped me better, it would be to have done mixed methods, right? To do both quantitative and qualitative. But I moved to quantitative because I knew that there is a lasting power to quantitative data. It's unfortunate, but there is, right? So, people do want to see that, or at least they want to have that quantitative evidence, but they want to hear the stories, right? So both go together. So when I started out, I really wanted to get that quantitative side of things. So, and so that's what I did. That's what I did for really the first 10 years. There's some qualitative stuff too, but I really wanted to help support the practitioners that are doing the work, right? So that's the other thing. When you move into research, you can do some applied research, but it's not at the same frequency as somebody that's a practitioner that's meeting with people every single day and they're working with individuals, they're doing groups every day. And so I wanted to have some evidence for those people, right? So I say, yeah, I want to run 5 more hip hop groups, and asking permission from their supervisor to run these hip hop groups. And the supervisor's like, what? Hip hop groups? Why would you do that? But they have some evidence that says...
That's never happened before. Nobody's
right.
ever said that about hip hop before.
Yeah. And that's the sad reality. But so I wanted to, and then the second layer of that is I wanted to give a language and structure to what is going on. So not only would people have some evidence, they would have a way to talk about it in a way that people might understand a little bit better. So that was kind of, but to your question is what would have helped me measure it better, I feel, is if I would have done more mixed methods so that I could have the quantitative and the qualitative. So like now, after doing all this quantitative work for so long, I want to move back into some more qualitative work.
So, we're just moving into the last couple of questions now. What guidance do you wish you had before starting to help you evaluate better, to help your evaluation skills to improve them?
In a similar way as, and it wasn't that I didn't know that mixed methods was best, but it was, well, acknowledging how important that is. I think that another piece would have been, even though measuring impact is essentially a priority within research, processes are as valuable in the applied research side of things. And it's something that I'm moving more into now. Not that I didn't understand it at the time, but I wish I had invested as much in articulating the processes as I did the impact on the quantitative side. So kind of pulling it all together, evaluating processes, quantitative and qualitative, with the same level of depth and nuance earlier would have allowed me to be in a little bit better place to articulate the different dimensions of my work. Conceptually, it's there, but from a measurement and evaluation standpoint, I'm playing catch up to where the work is conceptually, if that makes sense.
It does.
And so, and that's still an area of growth. And, as researchers, we can't necessarily do everything. And I think that's one of the advantages that research teams have. I've done a lot of the research side of things more independently. I do have a lot of collaborations, but I think it's one of the advantages that like really large research teams have is that people can look at different elements of the same body of work, right? If you got 5 people working on the same thing, one person could be taking a deep dive into processes, another person can be taking a deep dive into the qualitative side of things, another person can take a deep dive into the quantitative side of things. One person can look at, scales and measures, and you know what I mean? So you can diversify and add multiple layers of depth to the same phenomena with that type of research collaborative. And so, there's very few things that I regret so it's not coming out of a place of regret. It's coming more of a place of like looking back and reflecting what areas could have been stronger. And that's one of those areas for me.
One thing I'm picking up on is the fact that we're having this conversation. I'm at the start of my research journey and career. I've had probably about a decade now of researching informally on my own as a lay person, or through my Masters of Science, it was a thesis on how rap might be therapeutic. But I want to do more and more, and so you're giving me an idea of things that I might do differently, because other researchers before me have said we need to do quantitative stuff because it's more respected and that's how you might get a foot in the door. That might have been needed then in your time when you were starting, and it sounds like it was the right path. Now that has opened the door and people like me are starting to step through, and then there's a new generation of music researchers and hip-hop practitioners and workshop facilitators and human beings mucking about with hip-hop. That's basically what this is. Human beings mucking about with hip-hop and seeing what makes us happy. That's my next thesis title.
Mucking around in hip-hop.
Yeah. How do I get happy from mucking about with hip-hop?
Exactly.
You heard it. Yeah, you heard it from this podcast. So if anybody wants to fund that piece of research, just contact me at hiphophealsuk@gmail.com.
in 2025, when I see that book on the shelf, I'm be like, there it is.
Yeah, to be honest, joking aside, I've just given out my email address, hiphophealsuk@gmail.com. If you are listening to this and you are interested in research and developing the field of therapeutic hip-hop, then I know at least 2 people in this podcast space that would want to hear from you, because there's not very many of us around. So we want to grow the field. And the whole reason that, we're doing this podcast is to do exactly that. It is a form of research. So this brings me nicely on to the next question. What would a job description look like for somebody doing therapeutic hip-hop practice? So 5 person specifications in that job description. Go.
I'd say, one of the things that's very important is a solid, like, you don't have to be an expert, but have a solid understanding of the roots of hip hop culture and, some of the early energies that contributed to the start of the culture.
Okay, that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two.
And coupled with that is a respect for the culture, is an honest respect that people live and breathe the culture in a way that is self-sustaining. I always say it's a renewable resource that doesn't need external forces to nurture. There's a community and a full-on culture with subcultures that help keep it going, and is a life force for a lot of people. That's empowering. It's renewable. It's spiritual for many. And it is a real contributor to mental and physical and spiritual well-being for a lot of people, and respecting that. I think that's critical.
So number three?
Again, sort of branching from that is, I would say, cultural humility and responsiveness, right? Is understanding sort of what you feel and see and believe can be meaningful and valuable to you, but that's not the end all and be all. And so that will allow you to show up within hip hop cultural spaces with some integrity and respect. And to be able to really distinguish hip hop culture from entertainment and entertainment kind of culture, like that's its own. Mainstream entertainment is a different thing because it's often attached to capitalism. And so it's, there's a differentiation between the culture and just understanding. And you can have your own views and appreciation, but just understanding that context, I think, is important.
So would you say that cultural humility, would you say that cultural humility thing was a part of the ability to distinguish the capitalism from the culture, and that's part of the same? Or would you say the discernment to distinguish was four? Or would you say they're both three?
Yeah, I guess the discernment to distinguish is probably part of two. But it's, there's like the concentric circles things, right? So your cultural humility and responsiveness allows you to see these different elements of society. So, yeah, so I said the cultural humility and responsiveness is its third piece, because that's the you part, right? Like where am I culturally and experientially myself, right? And what I am is not the end all to be all. Like that's distinct from respecting the culture in and of itself. I think they kind of overlap, but I guess the third one is more about kind of the you or the me part of the conversation, right?
Okay.
My own identity.
So moving on to number four.
Number four, I'd probably say is around trauma, right? Being trauma responsive. And we talked a little bit about that earlier. Just understanding kind of the landscape of people's lived experiences and how trauma can show up. And being able to acknowledge, respond, not be proactive and not trying to trigger, and being able to manage if people are triggered and understand where that stuff is coming from, and try not to take certain things personally because it may be reacting to something that's has nothing to do with you. I think is really important. And then
number five,
the last one I would say is engage with the culture, right? try to participate in some way. Create, do, try out, try to, you don't have to be an expert. I always say, like, I consider myself like an advanced novice, so I don't, I enjoy it, because that's the other part, right? Is so to engage in, for something to be therapeutic or empowering doesn't mean that it has to be something that you're putting out on SoundCloud and on Bandcamp and, putting out for sale. It's how do you engage and participate in a way that is meaningful for you and helps you to either, regulate or to be more grounded, or to express yourself in the way that you need to express yourself, or to be inspired to act in the world in a way that is helpful for you or for a community that you prioritize and value, so that you can be an agent of change, right? So how does engaging in the culture do something that is empowering? And so if you can facilitate that, that's great. And so one way to help is to try it yourself, right? And really try, all the things that we know are potentially beneficial. Try it on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rap. So I'm
Yeah.
calling you Rap just to let everybody know. I've said the word a couple of times, and I thought afterwards some people might know that's your nickname. Other people might not know that because Raphael, the first three letters happen to be Rap.
That's the perfect nickname, right?
It is. It is. There's a guy in England called Chipmunk who said that the word rap is in therapy. Hip hop's therapeutic. The word
exactly
therapy even has rap in it. So
there's no therapy without rap,
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for coming. I could have spoken to you all evening, and I'm always grateful for the opportunity to exchange ideas with you, as every time it happens, a new lamp gets lit in my brain, and you verbalize things that I've been thinking about in a different way. I think we're in different continents, as are many people who are practicing this. There's so few of us. There's just a couple of people here on one continent and another couple of people on another continent. And lots of people do the practice, but they might not do it in the rounded way with all the different strands of practice, research, and the therapy. There's different layers of it. So there's few and far between conversations that I can have like this. So I'm very, very grateful.
Thank you for the invitation. Yeah, it's like, exactly. I could talk with you about this for a full day. We can keep vibing on it, but I really appreciate the space to be able to kind of elaborate on some of these things. A lot of times it's like, just say a few things. So having the opportunity to really kind of explore some of these is not often had. So I really appreciate the chance.
My pleasure. I was thinking we're untying knots, just as you said the word knot then. We're unraveling plaits and braids and twists in ropes. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to this, listeners. And we are coming towards the end of our final 36 Chambers series now. So not very many episodes left. You nearly hit the final pinnacle, and we'll be back in the next chamber to chat to our next guest. So thank you, Dr. Raphael Travis. See you again soon.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.